Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the Hoopsters League of Action Heroes. Among the several things that our project is doing over the years, one of the most important things is talking about taboo subjects and trying to understand them better and spread awareness. One such subject or topic that we really touch upon is the LGBTQ community, which is very poorly understood, or there's very little information available about it. In today's talk, we are in conversation with Neeraja Sajan, who is a social scientist and an intersex studies scholar. And we are going to ask her about the various LGBTQ plus terminologies and how we should use them and why they are so important to know. Hi, Neeraja. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Nupur. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us, Neeraja, why did you agree to do this talk with us today?
So at the onset, I should say that I am part of the community as an ally. So when I started working on concerns of intersex people in India in 2014, things were really different then. Only 8 years have passed since then. But at that time, I realized that we as a society, not just in India, we say LGBTQI plus community, we talk about sexual orientation, we talk about gay people, we talk about transgender people, but we really don't understand what we are talking about because we don't know what those terms are. And now people do want to know. People do want to become allies and supporters. People want to support their own family members. And it's really important that we learn all this when we are getting into that position. So yeah, this is really important that we do that. And that's why I not just agreed, I'm really happy to be here and to talk about all this.
Right. So the first thing that I want to
have this conversation with you.
Okay. The first thing that I want to ask you is, for a long time, we knew the community as the LGBTQ community. Okay. Then it became the LGBTQIA. Now we have the LGBTQIA+. What is this? Tell us why this is happening. Why is it changing so much?
So the main reason is that at the beginning, the rights movement of the LGBTQI plus community was spearheaded by lesbian and gay people and transgender people, and along with them, bisexual people. So LG, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgenders. Till date, there are many forums and occasions where only LGBT are spoken about. But the more and more people started understanding that there are diverse identities of gender, of sex, of sexuality, sexual orientation, more and more people started coming up saying that, hey, I don't fit into the traditional binary understanding of this particular aspect of identity, such as gender or sex. And the more we are learning about it, the more letters were added. At one point, we realized that we can't keep on adding all the alphabets because there are only 26 alphabets, and there are definitely much more diverse identities in our world. So that plus sign shows that not just the people who belong to the communities mentioned in that acronym, but all the other diverse identities included. And each of those identities, for example, the term transgender itself is an umbrella term for numerous identities that come underneath it. So yes, that's why we keep hearing more and more acronyms. We even hear K, that's for Kinner in India. So it's culturally specific, it's region specific. The acronym can change.
Okay. Now, that's
why we keep hearing new letters.
Right. So when you talk about identity, right? By and large, we understand that there are two genders, or at the most three. This is what we understand. I'm talking only about gender. Okay. So tell us a little bit about identity as such. Where does it come from? Because a lot of people don't get that, when you talk to them about this person identifies as female or identifies as male, that is still a subject that people don't understand. So where does this identity come from?
So you're talking about whether it's a choice, that question. This question is leading towards that angle, that do people choose to identify as so and so, as female, as a woman?
Right. The reason I'm asking this question is
your question.
The reason I'm asking this question is for a lot of people.
So I understood your question.
Yeah. Neeraja, your voice is cracking. So I'm sort
I
of
understood where
talking.
you're coming from.
Your voice is cracking, so I'm sort of talking over you. I don't want to do that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No. I think there is a lag between us. You're not talking over me.
Okay. All right.
So I'll pause before going into the next sentence. That's
Right.
Okay. So the reason why we have confusion or difficulty understanding about the term identity itself is because many human beings are identifying with the identity that others thought they would. Understand? When a child is born, the child does not come waving a flag saying I'm a girl, I'm a female. It does not. No child does that. But as soon as the child is born, we say, oh, you have a baby girl, oh, you have a baby boy. Okay? In many cases. And that child grows up to identify, girl grows up into a woman, a boy grows up into a man. And we don't realize that we are identifying ourselves as a man because we've always been told that we are. Do you get where I'm coming?
Right.
Yeah. So what happens is all of us have an identity. I'll share an anecdote from my own personal life. I must have been in 7th standard. I had really short hair, boy cut, like we used to call it. And it was sports day. And I was sitting inside the van. And so only my shoulders were visible. And I was talking to a friend, a boy, who was standing on the ground. So this much younger boy came running and asked me, hey, big bro, where are you going? Where do you live? And I was really offended. So I was sitting down. So I lifted my skirt up, showing that I'm a girl. I'm a boy. Because I'm a girl, and come on, this guy is coming and calling me bhaiya. We cisgender people do not go through many instances in life where we realize that we identify ourselves as man or woman. We just assume that's who we are. But that is part of all of us. It's not just for people with diverse identities. It's just that our social system is rigged to cisgender people who, therefore, that is where it comes from. They identify as transgender. They are who they are, just like we are who we are. That person identifies. The only problem that comes up is the rest of the society is not realizing it before they themselves do. A transgender child or a transgender person is born and grows up to identify as transgender. Okay. But when the child is born, based on the physical anatomy, especially the external genitalia of the child, which is how we as a society decide whether the child is a boy or a girl, we say that, okay, for example, they tell me I'm a girl. They bring me as one. They tell me girls are supposed to do this, girls are supposed to play with those toys. Even really famous chocolate companies have those blue and pink color schemes for boys and girls. Right. So we have a specific idea what a girl and what a boy who are comfortable with this image of a girl I'm supposed to be. I realize I am not a girl, but I'm a boy. But the rest of the society takes a lot of time and it's much prejudiced against taking, okay, you're a boy, so it's fine. Then you're a boy, sorry, we didn't realize it sooner. Mm-hmm. That should be the narrative. But what is it? You can't be it. It's not a choice. It's who they are. So that term identity, I can come in and give you sociological definitions for identity. But that's not going to help us to understand how it works in our everyday.
Right.
So that's what it happens. So nobody is choosing their identity. We are who we are. It's a term that is used often by everybody, but they don't understand the weight of it.
Okay, makes sense. Now,
so, yes.
Just to because we're talking about this whole umbrella of terms, before we get into that, let's try and understand the basic difference between gender, sexuality, and sexual orientation. How are the three different?
Okay. One thing that we should realize here is all of us, each person in the world has our own worldview. We have our own understanding of what, like you say, any argument. Any argument has different perspectives.
Right.
So the same thing can have different meanings for different people. But for the sake of us as a community or a society to work together, to function together, we have a common understanding, and that's what I'm talking about here.
Right.
So gender and gender identity are not the same. Gender is the concept that is framed, socially constructed roles, attitudes, and behaviors.
Okay.
A girl, what a girl, a boy, what a man, a woman, what a trans person, all of that. What are we supposed to be? Who are we supposed to be? That's gender. And gender identity is the self-identity of a person as belonging to a particular gender.
Okay. Okay.
So when we talk about gender, we use words just, gender identity. We talk about words as feminine, masculine, man, woman, trans person, trans woman, trans man. So all of that come under gender and gender identity.
Right.
Now, sexuality and sexual orientation are often considered the same thing, and it do have the same meaning. It's the same aspect of a person's identity. So a person's identity is the amalgamation of all these different aspects, gender, of sex, of gender identity. And it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. About what education you had, which college you went to, all of that comes into a person's identity. But here we are focusing on gender, sexual orientation, and sex. So sexuality is a person's attraction or a person's inclination towards other people in a romantic, in an aesthetic, or in a sexual way. And I say or in a sexual way because sexual orientation need not mean that you're sexually attracted to somebody. Not being sexually attracted to somebody can be a sexual orientation. And people who are not sexually attracted to other people are known as asexual people. They can be. Some asexual people can be romantically attracted to others. And some asexual people can even have sexual relationships. So here, I don't want to make it too complicated, but here what we need to understand is the more we get to know about each identity, each aspect of identity, the more we are going to realize that there is no known end line. It just keeps going on. We can learn more and more and more. I am still learning, and I have been an ally. I have been considered a very strong ally for 8 years now, and I am I have done various research on intersex concerns in India for 8 years, and still I'm learning. I'm not too proud to say I know everything or anything. I am learning every day. I'm learning a lot. I just recently learned that asexual people can have asexual relationships. So how does it work together? What does it happen? All of this can be very confusing for someone hearing all this for the first time. It takes patience. It takes time, but we can understand it, and more than understanding, we can respect it.
Right. That's very important. Right, you're right. Just respecting, I think their point of view, or saying that, listen, I identify like this, and not constantly questioning it. I think that is very important for us to open our minds a little bit,
Yes. We need to understand so that we can learn more about our world, learn more about people we love, who are our friends, who are in our surrounding. But more than all that, acceptance and respect is the most important thing that we need to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
And so that's gender. Yes, please.
Continue.
So that's gender identity, sexual orientation, sexuality, all of that. And now we have sex.
Okay.
So earlier I said that we assign a gender to a child, assigning a gender. I said gender is a self-identity. Like I have to identify myself as belonging to a particular gender. But what we do is that we assign genders to every newborn baby. Yeah, and that is based on the sex of the child, which is not, sex of a person is not just dependent on external genitalia. It is dependent on different criteria such as sex hormones, sex chromosome, external genitalia, internal organs, gonads, and gametes, like egg or sperm producing body, all of that. It comes into all these categories, decide a person's sex in social sense. Even though it's a lot of biology, this is their understanding socially. So based on sex, if you have female external genitalia or male external genitalia, which again, we have standardized, like you have these parts you are a female sex. If you have these parts, you are a male, you are a person with male sex. That's also standardized. And I'll come to why I'm emphasizing that standardized, the term standardized here a bit later. So when that happens, socially we tend to conflate the term sex and gender a lot. We think that sex and gender are the same thing, and it is not. Because, see, we teach people, or we teach through socialization by learning how to be a human being. We are born animals, we learn to be social animals. That socialization process is how we learn to be part of our society, how you pick up your cultural traits, how you pick up your cultural language, everything, all of that.
Right.
You also pick up what it means to be in a particular gender, and you realize what your own gender identity is. But sex is something that you're born with.
Okay.
And if, just this question, there is no doubt that we have diverse gender identities. But conventionally, we only had man, woman, binary. If that were true, if like a lot of people believe that if you're born with this body, you will belong to that gender, then we can't have these many diverse identities.
Correct.
There is no guarantee. There is no complete. We really don't have a full understanding yet, not scientifically, not socially, how and who can become a gender non-conforming person. And when I say non-conforming, I mean non-conforming to the binary of manhood. Okay, so diverse identity. So this is proof enough that sex and gender are not the same thing.
Right.
And sex itself is not a binary. It's not just female and male. Sex is also a spectrum, and there are intersex variations, which people with intersex variations are people who have atypical sex characteristics other than male or female. So there are definitely over 20 intersex variations. Some accounts say 40, but I am comfortable saying over 20 because each of those over 20 variations, each variations have sub-variations.
Oh my God, okay.
And depending on the variation, 1 in 200 live births to 1 in 2000 live births are intersex people, intersex children.
Okay.
Estimate, again, we don't have an official estimate anywhere on earth, we don't, but even UN abides by this unofficial estimate that 1.7% of human population are intersex.
Okay.
And this is not a phenomenon that is only in human beings. You can see it throughout plant and animal species. We learn about them also. We learn about, this is a favorite example of mine, androecium and gynoecium, flowers with only the male reproductive system, flowers with only female reproductive system, flowers with both female and male reproductive systems. We learn about all this. But we don't think what it means when it comes to other living organisms.
Right.
So there are a lot of studies in veterinary science about domesticated animals having intersex variations. Intersex variations among fish is extremely extensively studied. And among humans, we are just coming to the realization, okay, human beings are also part of that animal species thing. And now we are giving more attention to the various different. So sex is a spectrum, gender is also a spectrum. Sex and gender are not the same. So that is there. So I will continue during our conversation. I'll continue explaining this much more.
Okay.
But yes, I'm coming back to you.
So correct. Now, since you're talking about the spectrum as such, okay. Now, when you try and Google or try and understand how many different kinds of sexual identities or gender identities are available, there are so many that are numbered. Some say 46, some will say 52, some say 85. So, is there a real number, or is it still evolving?
It's still evolving. It's still evolving. Like I said, in the scenario of intersex variations, doctors, medical doctors are still finding different sub-variations, different intersex variations, because we do not know how many there are. In the same way, gender identities, sexual orientations, we have no idea how many there are. We know that there. Earlier, it was like, okay, we have men, we have cisgender men, we have cisgender women. I will explain this some cisgender after this. And then we have trans men, trans women. Okay, that's the gender identity. That's the spectrum. But now activists and scientists and social scientists have come to the understanding that the term transgender itself is an umbrella term. It's not just trans men, it's not just trans women. There are numerous identities of that people who identify as transgender, but not as trans men or trans women. In India, in 2014. Today is a really great day, April 15th. 7 years ago, the Supreme Court of India legally recognized the third gender in India. And in the verdict, the judge who gave the verdict had very clearly said that we are calling the third gender in India as third gender and not transgender because we do not want to exclude the different identities that come within the transgender umbrella, but do not identify as transgender. To explain this more, you might have heard of Hijra community, of Kinnar community, of Aravanis in Tamil Nadu. We have community Jogappa, we have Jogar. So all of these communities are diverse gender identity communities. Very loosely, we can call them transgender. They are transgender people, but they are not the same. They are a community with their own culture, with their own social structure and all of it. So the identities in itself differs.
Okay.
And they all come under the third gender. They are, when you say transgender is an umbrella term, all of these communities come under the transgender community. We can loosely understand them as trans women. We can loosely understand other community or people as trans men. But when it comes to identity itself, it changes. It's shifting. So this is just India. These are just very few examples I'm giving in India. So imagine how it is around the world. Like for every trans woman in India will not identify as Hijra, contrary to the popular belief. Because they say that she's a Hijra. That's one term that we hear throughout India because it's very popular and a visible term in India. And not every trans woman would recognize as Hijra. That's the difference.
Okay. So basically, you're telling me that there is a biological aspect, there's a psychological aspect, and there's a cultural aspect also to your identity.
Yes. Yes, every person, come on. It's not just here in diverse identity. Each of us, all of us might be women. You and I are women, but we are not the same. My identity as a woman, it has a certain cultural aspect of where I have been, where I was born, what culture I was brought up in. All of that matters.
Right.
So yeah, my identity as a woman might not be the same as yours, or might not be same as some other woman's identity, because my identity belongs to my culture. But again, I might be born in the same culture and still be different. So identity, we have a social identity, we have a community identity, cultural identity, and a personal, very specific identity. Right. But all of this come together to form my identity.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So, but see, the reason why it's so important to understand this, like you said, that Hijra is not the only one that is, that a trans woman or man would identify as, which is something I didn't know. I thought that this is what I thought it was like a regional, what do you call it, terminology. Like in this region, that's what they're called. I thought it was like a language thing.
Our language for trans women.
Right. So I thought it's a language thing, which is very interesting that you tell me that they identify from their communities. So now you tell me, when it's very difficult for somebody to actually get to understand all of this. Like you said, you've been working for 8 years and still you're learning today. So if I do not know,
and I'm considered a newbie.
Right.
8 years and I'm considered a newbie.
So one thing that I always wonder is, you can't be very sure of how a person would like to identify themselves, especially when it comes to their sexual orientation, gender identity and their sexual orientation, because it's not something you talk about. You go by the physical aspect. If a person is dressed like this, it's a girl. If a person is dressed like this, it's a guy. But we don't know what their identity is, what they're thinking in their head. So how does somebody who doesn't have information about this approach it? You can't go and ask everybody, hi, my name is Nupur, your name is so and so. How do you identify yourself? It does, that's not. I don't know if that's how it works. How do how do you make sure that they don't feel offended or we don't use the wrong terms? How do you do that?
Okay. So this is something that I personally have had problems with because, starting out, I didn't know anything. And so even now I have problems in some areas. So initially I thought it's a sign of respect and it's a sign of understanding to go up to a person and ask hello, and how would you like to, what pronoun would you like me to use for you? Or how would you like me to address you? And in many cases I was like, oh, okay, great, you're being so sweet, and you can call me her, you can call me them. I have had that reaction. But at the same time, not recently, a few months ago, I went to somebody who I had just met, and I was like, what pronoun would you prefer? And the person, I still don't know what pronoun. I have had lots of interactions with the person, so I will refer to the person as the person. Okay, are we stuck again? Nupur?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So you froze on my screen, so I didn't know if our connection had got cut again.
Right.
Okay, so I have interacted with that person for months, and I still don't know what pronoun the person uses. So I am going by the person here. So the person told me, like, it's better just to call me or address me by my name. Don't ask people for their pronouns. It's better if you don't know their pronouns, just use their names. And I was like, okay, that also makes sense. I know the person's name, so it's okay, I can use the name. But do you know how difficult it is? It's very difficult to just not use a pronoun. Yeah. But I think it's very good for us to practice that, because I have a very close friend who is gay and who also has other diverse identities in their identity, but prefers the pronoun they, them. Okay. And even though I have known this friend for years, when I'm talking about my friend, the word he, him, keeps creeping in my life. Keeps creeping in, it just creeps in, okay, into my conversations. And then I correct myself and I say they, them. And this is because most of our languages are, English is much better. Regional languages I have a harder time, because language is grammatically constructed in binaries of he, her. In Hindi, we use gender grammar even for objects. So it's very difficult for us to come out of that grammared idea. So the more we use a person's name, the better it is. Because, come on, I cannot come and tell you, okay, it's okay to ask for gender, because some people are okay with it, some people are not. And I'll tell you why. Cisgender people have a luxury, a privilege of everybody knowing who you are by just looking at you. Okay, they know how to talk to you, they know how to behave to you. Depending on where you're from, if you're in a Western nation, it would be okay for somebody to come hug you. But if you are in a rural village in India, a guy will not come hug a girl, no matter how friendly they are. So depending on where you are, all of that, people know how to behave towards you. And we don't go through questions like, okay, what should I call you? Okay, what should I call you? Or mispronouncing or misusing the pronoun I identify with. It's not just about the pronoun. Every time somebody gets it wrong, or every time somebody is asking a person, it is also clearly sending the message that I don't know what your identity is. It's not clear to me. It's showing that I can't make sense of you. And a person having to go through that again and again, a constant questioning of their identity, of who they are, but you might ask only once, but 100 people might have asked that person already that day. Right. And that is a psychological distress that unless you go through it, we won't be able to understand, but we can empathize with it. So it might be difficult for us, but why not? Right. And the more you get to know them, maybe in a few conversations, you might be able to understand their preferences.
Right.
So that is it.
So you say that it's better to just initially address them by their names, or up, like up, like, I don't know. Like,
up, yes, up, yeah.
Ye ja rahe hain, ya rahe hain. I think that is the simplest way to do it,
Yeah.
I think, so just
Yeah, they, them, it's a sign of respect in Hindi. It's a sign of respect in most Indian regional languages. So that's also fine.
Right.
In English, if we say they, them, that would be a problem. Instead we can use their name, the
Right.
person's name. Okay. And another thing that I would like to add here is that the one tendency is that we need to know that person's identity. Pronoun, sure, so that we don't offend them, what they prefer, fine. But what does it really matter what their sexual orientation is, what their sex is, what their gender identity is, if we are in a conversation, unless you're planning going shopping or something personal that, again is very gendered, what does it matter?
Right.
In a general conversation, in a conversation of show of support, it doesn't matter there. Unless you are looking to support somebody. If you are looking to support somebody, then you would probably know more about them.
Correct. Right.
If you are trying to learn to support someone in your family or in your friend circle, you would know what is happening with them, and they might have talked to you about it. You will have more information. But if it's a stranger, then we can treat them as, like how you would like to be treated, with respect, with dignity, and just get to know them.
Right. Right.
And again, you can have this practice of letting people know, I prefer he, her. You might be cisgender, you might not have a diverse identity, but in your emails, start putting under your name pronouns his, her, or his, him, her, she. And that, if it becomes a practice in the society by everybody, instead of just assuming you will know who I am, it is also a sign of inclusivity. Right. It's breaking a barrier down.
Right.
A few people have to struggle with that. But if we are having a social practice like this, it's just coming to the top of my head. I'm not saying that this is the way to go. And that's one way. All of us can think of what can we do, kind of.
Right.
So we have prefixes Mr., Miss, Mrs., right? And now, not just now, it's been there for some time, MX instead of MS, MX. That's a gender neutral term that can be used by anybody instead of Mr. or Miss or Mrs. I have started using it. I am cisgender. I identify as a woman. I am a female. All of that is there. But why can't I use that? I prefer using it. I definitely don't prefer using Mrs. I have no idea why, but I prefer using Miss. Now I have started using MS. And that is a way that if you're addressing somebody in an email or if you're addressing somebody online, you can use that thing. The more people use it, the less of a message it becomes that I don't know your gender identity, I don't know your preference. If everybody starts using it, if more and more people from cisgender identity, from every identity start using gender neutral terms, it becomes clear that it's not because I don't know who you are, I don't know your identity, your preference. It's more about the fact that need not matter in this conversation.
Right.
We are talking about how to make a change. We can get opinions, we can get suggestions, but based on personal experience. But in our conversation, we don't need to bring that in.
Right.
That I understanding where to have that perspective is very important.
Right. So there's a question here which says, how early in age? Ankita Umakant asks us a question. How early in age can we find signs in a child to help them? That I'm thinking that she means that they identify themselves differently. How do you find these signs and how do you help them?
Okay. So, a person's expression of identity, whether it's gender expression or whether it's expression of their sexual orientation, it can vary vastly. I love this thing where people say that there can be as many humans as there are gender expressions. Okay. So usually, I knew an intersex child whose mother was bringing the child up gender neutrally, who by the age of 4 had started referring to herself as she, her. I'm a good girl. Aren't I a good girl? So that was around 4. Not every child much, but you will, as very small children, boys like wearing saris. At least they used to. I don't know what little kids do now, but they like dressing up and having things. So, excuse me. So over the years, they shift to their gender identity or activities they associate with their gender identity. So there is no an age at which we can say, oh, this is the age that the signs will appear. Some of those signs that we think are signs might fade over time. It might just be a child growing up. What we can do is understand if the child will start showing, even speaking about it, like I don't feel like doing it. Having a safe environment where a child feels that they can talk about anything or express anything gives us more chance of understanding what's happening with the child.
Right.
So today there was UNDP released a framework for welfare of transgender people in India, and in the meeting, one official who's working in the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment was saying that many children, transgender people, drop out of school around 8th standard because around that time when they're hitting puberty, when they're hitting puberty and people do not, lean towards what the gender identity they're supposed to, then that becomes a problem. A person can be a cisgender man and still have a feminine gender expression. Dancers who are men sometimes have feminine gender expressions. That's one famous example that we keep using everywhere. It's not so anymore. Dancers not, but earlier, much earlier, decades earlier, when Bharatanatyam dancers, men who are Bharatanatyam dancers used to have effeminate body language, gender expression. But that doesn't make them a woman or a trans person. They are men with the gender expression still. So there are so many different things. Again, coming back to the question, if there are signs, it's not specifically age specific, but having an environment which makes the child feel safe, we get to know more what the child is going through. The child will share what the child is going through. And that's the biggest indicator of all.
Right. There's another question. Is there a need for everyone to use gender neutral titles like MX? Some people may be uncomfortable with it. Shall I read that?
Sure, definitely. I mean, if there are people, I'm pretty sure people who have had to fight for their gender identity to be who they are, they might not want to give up the privilege of or the choice of using gender specific terms. Okay, that is definitely there, and some cisgender people might not feel comfortable with it. But I am saying that what we can do here is make our society much more sensitized and aware that while we use these gender specific terms, how it can be excluding a huge population of human beings. That's what we need to remember. Right. It's okay to use what we are comfortable with. I am comfortable with MX because I just am. I don't have an explanation for it. But like I said, when I was a kid, somebody misunderstood me to be a boy, and I was not so happy with it. So that's there. Excuse me. So we need to have a society that's sensitized and aware and much more inclusive than it is now. And that's the goal. This was just one thing that I do towards that. Right. Each of us might have different ways of doing. That's it.
Right. Actually, there's one thing that I always wonder about is while awareness is very important, you need to know these terms, you need to know these pronouns, you need to know them. But I feel the more the awareness has been spread, like people are talking about it, people are saying things like that, different pronouns and all of that, the more the society starts walking on eggshells. Like, did I offend them? That is something that even I feel that, because the more I read about these things and the more videos I watch, sometimes I feel like, oh, did I offend that person? I may not have. So tell me, if somebody like the LGBTQ plus community, I'm sure they're aware that the society is not as aware, okay, as it should be. So do they really feel that offended when we get it wrong? Or are they open to correcting you? Or are they open? I know they have to do it again and again and again, which is frustrating, but Tell me how offended they actually feel in your interactions.
Hmm. So I am happy to say I haven't managed to offend anybody that much, or else people. I was very young when I started out, so people kind of took me under their wing. So I was fortunate and privileged in that way. But offended, yes. Hurt, even more, and completely misunderstood too much. It's not about just offending them. It's not about offending. It's about an existential crisis.
Right.
That's what it is.
Right.
You know, having to keep fighting to be who you are, and then people keep telling you, I don't know who you are. And then they see people around, people see others around them who have much easier. So there's no need to walk on eggshells. And there are some people who get very offended, are very vocal about it, can be exposed about it, and not just in India, around the world. And this is not just about diverse identities, it's about race, it's about caste, all of it. If you see, people who have been oppressed can and will, some people will react very explosively if, somebody says the wrong thing. And it is expected that everybody knows it's not about being politically correct, it's about being inclusive of each other, of understanding each other, what the intersectionalities of the problems and privilege all of us have. Yeah, it's about that. The problem with wondering if we are being on eggshells, walking on eggshells, or wondering about offending people, is that we tend to keep ourselves calm. Okay, what you can do is you can find a space or people whom you feel safe with, and talk to them about it, learn more about it, and then you start going to, maybe do not talk much at the beginning when you're going to meeting. I did that. I used to listen and try to learn a lot. Then I learned that one person has a view that does not go with another person. I went to a meeting where I asked a question and I was shot down because, it's not just up to the community to do this, to do this, in the sense that we were talking about welfare measures and how we can make certain changes happen. And I was shot down saying that the community members should not be expected to do it. Society should also do it. And another person who came up to me later, and I was discussing it with them, and they said, no, we can't expect the society to stand up for us. We need to stand up for ourselves first, and then they will stand up, maybe.
Right.
Okay, so within the community, there are different perspectives. So we need to know what it takes time. It takes a lot of patience, but it is also very easy if you just listen and if you just absorb a lot of information. And the internet has made it very, very easy for us to access information. Not everything on the internet is right. Not everything on the internet is accurate. But for example, Hoopsters is a great initiative. We know, okay, we can go to Hoopsters to get authentic information. We can trust that information that's coming from them. Or we can go to the United Nations page. We can go to UNDP. We can go to a Free and Equal page. Again, Free and Equal is a major initiative of UN for LGBTQ people. So we have authentic sources that we know for sure are authentic, or to their best efforts, they have tried to bring accurate information out, so we can learn from that. Walking on eggshells is the first instinct. I went to it myself, but it becomes a barrier in, understanding,
right.
And we can't get to that allyship place.
Right. So I think the basic problem that arises when it comes to using pronouns and understanding somebody's gender identity, unlike race, ethnicity, etc., is that there is no, it's not always a physical. I can't see it. I can see somebody belongs to a certain race or ethnicity or whatever, but as far as gender identity goes, I can't see. Which is why it is very difficult for. That's why I think that eggshell thing happens. I don't really see what this person is, and
or you can't make a decision based on what you see.
Exactly. So I can't just see this and say this person is a female. I can't do that. So I think that is something that I always wondered. Do you think that there's something, if somebody from the community is watching this, okay, how can they make it easier for people around them? Is there something that they can also do to make it less uncomfortable or less, ambiguous for other people? Do you think there's something they can also do?
Sure, there is. I mean, from what I have seen, I have, again, I refer to my friend. So I have lots of friends, but this one friend is one person I rely on a lot to give me what's correct and what's not correct, because they are plugged into the different aspects of community. So I asked them, and I asked, one thing they told me was, sure, not losing your cool when you talk to somebody is fine. But again, they're also people. Just like we are also people, and it depends on what we are going through at that particular moment. And not everything is about to do with identity. I might have exams. I might have had a fight with a friend. Might have a fight with my partner. So all of that happens. What can community members do? Sure, take a time to explain. But one person is one person. The onus of bringing out how to deal with, how to bridge cisgender, heterosexual people. That's a binormative, people with binormative identities in touch with the diverse community of diverse identities. The onus is not on the diverse identity, because cisgender people are more out there. So I might be a person, I might be a trans woman, I might be an intersex person, I might be a lesbian or bisexual person, or a pansexual person, asexual person, any of that identity or more, or a combination of different identities I might have. If 100+, I live openly. I tell people I am a lesbian woman, or if I am a trans woman or a trans man, and I live openly, that is fine. But there are so many people who would prefer. I know so many people who do not want others to know that they are trans women or trans men, and they would prefer to be known as men or women. Okay. So what can the community do? I would prefer not to answer for the community. One suggestion that I got from the community is that we can try not to lose our cool. We can try to explain, and the community is already doing something very major that we overlook. We are bringing the very fact that we know about transgender people, we know about gay and lesbian people. It goes to the sacrifice and years, decades. I'm not exaggerating. Decades of dedicated work done by community members to bring awareness, bring visibility in the country, and they are doing it. So it's the society's turn to step up to the plate,
right,
and knock it out of the park.
Absolutely. Now, let us talk about these terminologies, okay? Because this is what the talk is about. So, can you tell us some? Of course, there's so many of them, but what are some basic things that we need to know? Basic terminologies that we need to know and understand.
Okay. So I already explained sex and gender and how they're not the same and they're different. I spoke about how sex is a spectrum of intersex variations. I have spoken about transgender identity and how it is an umbrella term. So we hear words as transgender, we hear words as transvestite, we hear not a term that's used much anymore, but we hear about drag. There is something called the drag, and we hear about transsexual people. So here I'm trying to bring in the difference between transgender and transsexual people. So transgender person is anybody who does not identify themselves with the gender assigned to them at the time of birth based on their body. Okay? That is a transgender person. But now, being transgender does not automatically mean that they might go for gender affirming surgery, okay? Or they might go for hormone therapy. Need not. I can be a transgender person and opt not to go for it. I'm still a transgender person. But if I go through with the surgery, then I am going through gender affirming surgery, and I have had medical procedures done on to change my body affirms my gender. Then I am a transsexual person. So not every transgender person is a transsexual person, but every transsexual person is most probably transgender. I'm saying most probably because I'm not going to be absolute in terms, because there might be some people out there who might not. I do not know. Like I said, I have no idea. Right now, the understanding is it is, but it might change at any time. Like I want to keep bringing our focus back on that. There might be new information. There might be new understanding coming along right now. So yes. So that is transgender, transsexual. I explained who intersex people are. Intersex people are people with intersex variations, who are people who have sex characteristics. I listed them earlier. It might be sex hormone. I'll give you examples. Remember sports women who fail gender tests. Exactly how do you think they're testing gender? You can't test a person's gender. So most often they go for hormone testing. And there we have, again, remember I said I'll explain why I say standardized. So these women identify as women, and then they go through the hormone test, and we have an idea as a world, as a sports authority or council or international bodies, policy making bodies have an idea that, if you have this much hormone of this hormone, then you are a woman. If you have more than that, then you are not a woman. It doesn't make sense, because gender identity is not based on hormones. They are women no matter what their hormones or bodies say. They might be intersex. Or some women might have high hormone level, but we have an idea of this is what a woman should look like. This is what a woman's biology should be. Right. Okay, so so that is it. So that is so gender, transgender, intersex, and terms like asexual, terms like pansexual, bisexual, homosexual, heterosexual, all of this are in connection to sexuality or sexual orientation. Now, we also have allosexual instead of that is used as a term. So, being asexual, you say asexual. Allosexual is somebody who has sexual attraction to anybody, which means that you're sexually attracted. It doesn't matter whom you're attracted to. As far as you feel sexual attraction, you're allosexual. So there are, if you go on internet and try looking up terms connected to sexuality, you will come up with so many terms. There is gray sexual. I don't want to bring too much terminology in, but there are terminology that we don't hear every day that are present in the community, which are coined either to identify a particular community or an identity, or to bring inclusivity. For example, if we say a person is asexual, if I say I am allosexual, like I am allosexual because I'm sexually attracted to somebody, then being asexual is the other side of it. I shouldn't use the word other, that is really not okay. It's another side of it. Okay, so that makes it more inclusive. It makes it more a part of something. It's not just standalone. So that's the idea. So there are so many different terms. If you could bring me in another term, I would be, if I know about it, I'll try and explain it, or else we learn together. So these are the terms that are coming off the top of my head.
Right. See, most importantly, what I need to understand is when you're using these terminologies, right? Most of them, from my understanding, refer to the person's sexual preferences, and a few of them are related to their gender. Right?
Or
sex. I would assume, as a person who has no information, that knowing the gender-related terms are more important in a social setup than their sexual. I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Than the sexual preference terms, because
sexual orientation.
Yeah, sexual orientation terms, right? So the reason I'm saying this is, very rarely do we discuss a person's sexual orientation in a social setup, and as a person, I feel like that's not the first thing you talk about. But gender is something that is the one that causes hurt or offense, or this is my understanding. Okay, because I will not the first time.
No. I just got a point in my head. That's why my face looks like this. But
I'm just trying to try to explain why I mean why I'm trying to talk about this is that so when I meet you for the first time, right? The only question that I may have is, should I use he, her, she? Like, should I use they? What should I use? That is the first question that may come to my mind. But I will not really worry about, is she lesbian, is she gay, is she bisexual? That's not the first thing that comes to my mind. right? So tell me, what are these, basically the pronouns, like tell me how to, what are the, we know the pronouns now, but how do you make sure that you use them correctly? I know I'm repeating this question. What are the do's and don'ts of this? Just give us a summary.
Okay, before I do that, I would like to say why we feel that it's important for us to know more about how to, gender is what causes hurt and not sexual orientation. So in this meeting, it's fine. Okay, this is fine. You thinking only about my gender and how to address me, and you're talking to me, that is fine. Imagine that we are meeting very informally at a party. We are mutual friends and we come together, and I'm striking a conversation with you. And you're talking to me just like that. You don't think about you figure out I prefer he, she, and all of that. I mean, she, her, and all of that, and that's fine. How do you know that I might not be interested in you, and I'm trying to figure out if you might be interested in me? Okay, that's one thing, and that's a very, very silly example to take because it's not easy. It's very easy for a heterosexual couple to strike up a conversation, but for someone who is not heterosexual, it's not that easy because you don't know how it's going to be taken by the other person, or if the other person is going to be interested, or else if you're both going to get targeted because by others around you. That fear is there, and the privilege does not stop there. It also extends to the fact that if I say my husband, or I say my wife, how many people do not have that right? They don't have the right to call someone, to marry someone. They don't have the right to publicly be, now it's okay now in India, but I'm talking about the entire community around the world. How many people still have to live in the fear of persecution, still have not the right to tell someone that they love them? And then it's really funny for heterosexual couple, for me to be friends with a boy or a guy, if I'm a guy, for me to be friends with a girl, that's fine. But I've seen this in many places, and it really makes me really mad, and it makes me angry, and it makes me sad at the same time. If a person is openly being gay or bisexual, and then it's somebody who's not aware, who's not sensitized about any of these matters, this person tries to talk to them, they're just like, I'm not interested. If I can be friends with a group of people whom I can potentially be sexually attracted to, that is fine. Why is it not fine for people with diverse sexual orientation?
Right.
So all of this, we don't think about it because most heterosexual people, cisgender heterosexual people, are not coming into any situation where they might have that perspective. So when we start thinking along these lines, right now, I'm pretty sure you yourself would have a lot of things coming up. Okay, this, okay, that, oh, right, this coming. It's just that starting spark that takes for us to start thinking about. So it's not just about gender, it's also about all of that. So I was talking to somebody and I kept saying my partner, and I was asked, okay, when you say partner, are you married? Are you living together? Or is it what? I said, okay, I'm talking about my husband, but it doesn't, I prefer using the word partner because I have friends who don't have the privilege of marrying. I'm not saying that marrying is a privilege, but they don't have the right to marry the person they love. And therefore, I think, okay, so that's this again, this is a very personal thing. I do it. I'm not saying that everybody else. I do this. So that's it. Coming to the do's and don'ts of pronouns, like I said earlier, I have got different advice from different friends, different advice from different people I met. My practice is to just get into conversation with the person. It's very difficult. Since I use English in most of those conversations, it's easier. Regional languages, I speak different regional languages, and it's difficult in each one I know. And so we need to put in a lot of effort That's the first clue. Put in effort to watch your life. Put in effort to realize the words coming out of our mouth, and put in effort to own if you made a mistake, own the mistake you made, and just say that you can't do anything. If you are being very serious about this, and if you're being very conscientious, and you're doing the best you can, and even when you make a mistake, you can't do much more than apologize. I realize I made the mistake. I didn't mean to. It wasn't intentional, and I really regret if I hurt you. That's all you can do. A well-meant apology, a heartfelt apology is the only thing you can do, and you go forward from there. The other person might accept it, might not accept it. If they accept it, well and good, but make sure you don't do that again. You learn from your mistakes. That's another do. What you shouldn't do is get defensive. That's the first big no. Do not get defensive. You might feel defensive. You might know that you're just learning. You didn't mean it, and the other person might shout at you. And you also need to, one very big do is, you also need to know the limit. Like, the other person having a diverse identity does not have any right to abuse you verbally. No. Remove yourself from that situation. That's one thing. It's not about the diverse identity anymore. It's about the person. It's about the interpersonal interaction. And you need to know where to hold yourself, where to hold your respect, and do not offend the other person. Do not be extremely defensive with the other person. Give the other person a chance to know that you didn't mean it, and that's it. Also, make sure that you protect your own self-dignity. I'm saying this because some people tend to let anybody get away with anything if you make a mistake. Like, I make a mistake to you, and then no matter what you do, I'll be like, okay, I did that, so this is okay, this is okay. That also has a limit. Remember that. I'm not saying this for people with diverse identities. I'm saying this about human beings in general. We can, sometimes human beings can be very, for the lack of word, very, what do I say? I don't want to be very politically incorrect on video, but we can be not so nice sometimes.
Right.
And we tend to take advantage as people. If we have difference. The story of the tent and the camel and all of that. You give a bit space that they end up taking too much. So this is generally about human beings. So do not lose track of that. Trying to be a good person. So that people with diverse community, I have met so many people, but like in every other group, a few people might not be the best persons for you to start your introductory sessions with, or getting used to, or get learning more. And if you realize that, please know that they are not the example of the entire community. They're not the face of the entire community. Each person is their own person, and remember that.
So we have a question here from Jaya, who says, how is allosexual different from pansexual?
Okay. Being allosexual means that you're attracted to somebody. You're sexually attracted to somebody. As an asexual, your sexual orientation is not being attracted to anybody, sexually attracted to anybody. Allosexual just means that I might be attracted to women, I might be attracted to men, I might be attracted to both men and women, I might be attracted to all of that. As long as you have a sexual attraction, you have a sexual orientation based on having a sexual attraction towards someone, you're allosexual. Pansexual orientation, people with pansexual orientation are sexually attracted to everybody, irrespective of their gender and sex. That's pansexual orientation. Like bisexual orientation, you're attracted to men and women. With pansexual, you're attracted to everybody, irrespective of gender or sex. I'm repeating that, but that's the thing. Pansexual orientation is an orientation like being heterosexual or homosexual, asexual. Being heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual, pansexual, where in whatever sexual orientation you're attracted to, all of this comes under allosexual. And if you do not have a sexual attraction, you come under asexual.
Okay. Now, This one very interesting thing that happened. You used the word gender affirmation surgery. I'm understanding that it is the same. Is it the same as sex change surgery that we know of?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
earlier it used to be called as sex reassignment surgery, but now it is known as sex gender affirming surgery, because gender affirming surgery is done by people who have diverse gender identities trying to change their bodies into the body that affirms their gender. Intersex people, some intersex people might go for surgery, sex surgery, or sex constructive surgery or sex reconstructive surgery. Like I said, there are numerous variations. An intersex person can be identified as intersex at the time of birth in some cases, or it might become apparent later in life. You might think that the child is born with female sex or with male sex, and then the child grows up, and around the time of puberty, when the body is expected to go through specific changes dependent on the sex of the child, and the child does not go through with it, then you do tests and you find out that the child or the person or the adolescent is intersex. I know some intersex persons who found out they're intersex when they went to their doctor to figure out why they can't get pregnant. They were intersex, and that's why they. And some intersex people do have reproductive function. Okay, and some people choose to go with surgeries, which is why this distinction between gender and sex with intersex people and transgender people, this is why the term sex change surgery was changed to gender affirming surgery. They're affirming their gender. Whereas with intersex people, they might be doing surgery for their sex because of this, choosing the sex type. One more thing. Socially, we have this very wrong idea. I say the wrong idea or the misunderstanding that transgender people are people born with ambiguous genitalia. And many people find our jokes. There are insults about transgender people where they ask what's between your legs. So a transgender person, usually, there are some intersex people who identify as transgender, but other than those people, most trans people are born with one sex, like male or female sex, and they identify with the gender that is associated with another sex. I might have a male body. I was born with a male body, and therefore the gender associated with male body being a man or a boy, masculine gender, but I associate with female. Feminine gender, female. So the words male, female, intersex are used to talk about sex and only sex. Being a male does not guarantee that you are a man. That understanding has to be there. But we've used words like male colleagues, male colleagues. I was talking to a male colleague and somebody else mistook us for him as my boyfriend or as my partner. But since this is all because we use gender and sex as conflated, right? As interchangeable. Words just female, intersex, and male are used for sex, and words such as girl, boy, man, transgender, these are used for gender. Okay, so this difference, the more we understood, the more we differentiated, and this difference led to the term gender affirming surgery. But socially, we think transgender people are born with ambiguous genitalia. They ask what's between your legs. Are you a girl? Are you a boy? Do you have this? Do you have that? That is extremely derogatory. That's extremely insulting. That is extremely discriminatory and just not at all right.
Right.
It's the information is wrong.
Right.
Intersex people, some intersex variations, some people with certain intersex variations are born with ambiguous genitalia. At the time of birth, they realize this, and and medical doctors. So here I should make it clear, I am a medical sociologist, so this is my area of work, medical science and intersex people. Okay, so medical doctors are also part of our society which understands sex as binary. Medical training treats it the same.
Hmm.
They learn female anatomy, they learn about male anatomy, and then they learn about intersex variations as disorders of sex development. And there are so many different variations. And in India, at least in India, so far, all the medical students and doctors that I have interacted with have never had more than one lecture in their 5 years, 1 hour's lecture. And it's only when you go into specialties such as endocrinology or things like that, that this happens. Okay, so that is there. Where they learn about disorders of sex development and how they're supposed to treat it or cure it. And these doctors and parents together come together and try to correct or fix the sex of the child, which is called through surgeries, sex change surgeries, which are called intersex genital mutilation by intersex activists, intersex community. Even the UN has come forward. The UN Committee Against Torture has labeled intersex genital mutilation, IGM, as torture. And it has been going on, it's still going on, and we are all trying to bring a change in it, but it is there. So all these terms that I'm talking about is very important for us to understand. If a child is born, and a social crisis does happen, you don't know what to name the child. You don't know what to tell people. You don't know how to bring your child up. All that happens. But we can actually take a step back and realize that parents in our society with intersex children, there are parents who are bringing their child up gender neutrally, letting a child grow up to a level where the child tells us who they identify as, with gender, with sex, and then go, not immediately, they have to grow up a bit more. Also, the older the child gets, the more difficult the procedures, medical procedures might become. But weight against the other. If you put a newborn baby through a surgery and assign a sex, okay, I want a son, so I'll bring this child as a son. I want a daughter, so I'll bring this child up as a daughter. And then the child grows up and tells you that I am a boy. There are so many children who grew up to be adults who identified as, who were assigned the female sex, grew up to identify as men, and then realized they had gone through penectomy as a child. The organ they were born with was surgically removed. And this can cause psychological trauma, physiological trauma, end up making having a sex life impossible or painful, completely make a person infertile. Excuse me. All of this happens and we don't realize it at that time. So it's better to wait rather than just play with a person's life like that.
Wow, this is the first time hearing about this. This is pretty shocking, actually. Okay, so the thing is, what do you think is one drastic change that needs to happen in our society or within the community that can actually make a difference and make it easier for everybody to live and coexist together?
Teaching our children.
Teaching our children. Right.
That's the first thing. Because there is so many, we need to bring this into our formal education system, maybe. Definitely in our socialization. When we are bringing up children, we tell them about this. Just telling children about the LGBTQI community is not going to make them someone they are not. If a child is growing up watching gay men, doesn't mean that, abroad, at least here, we don't have that right now, but homosexual couples, gay couples, lesbian couples adopt children and bring them up. They might be having their own gender expression, all of that. It doesn't mean that every child who is being brought up by gay fathers, two fathers or two mothers, are going to be gay. They might be heterosexual. They will be who they are. Influence, yeah, sure, but having to live a life is not. It's not something anybody is going to choose. Some might be forced to do it. Some people are, unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, but nobody is going to choose to go through discrimination.
Right.
Okay. So having children learning about this is not going to make them someone who they are not. So there is no threat to them becoming gay because they learned about it. No. So that is it. This is a fundamental fear parents have. teachers also give it this fear. I mean, speak about this fear. Like, we tell them about all this, and then what if they turn out like that? Parents will have our heads, is what teachers tell us. We need to remember this, that, they can learn about it. They learn about so many things. They're not doing everything they learn about. Not everybody is becoming a historian. Not everyone is becoming a geologist or a geography person, or I don't know. So learning about it and understanding at a young age makes it more acceptable. Because the more we grow up, we learn so many things, and then we have to unlearn that and relearn it, which is very difficult.
Correct.
And we teach children how to speak without, you use language, understand that language can be excluding, it's not inclusive. Maybe they will tell us ways they can make language more inclusive. Children come up with so many ideas. They can change. They are the next face of our earth. All of them.
Absolutely.
They can bring in a change if they grow up with this mentality of inclusion.
Right.
We already see children standing up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the youngsters, I mean, people like teens, are a little more aware than what we were. When we were kids, we used to still make homophobic jokes, which today when I think about it, in classrooms and all of that, we used to make such homophobic jokes, which is, in today's world, absolutely unacceptable to me as a person, right? If this happened in the class, in my class today, I would probably, voice my opinion, but at that time we just kept quiet. But today I feel like the children are little more aware, which is a good thing. Now, there's one question that Ankita asks us, which is, do you think a lot of information on media is getting our adolescents to try and experiment a lot on their sexual orientation? Is there any research in this area?
I do not know about research in this area in India, but one thing that we need to remember is that earlier also you said that. I wanted to say this, I forgot. I lost track of that thought. In India, we are seeing a huge change in the way we think about sex, we talk about sex, we talk about anything sexual. When I was growing up, I don't think I had anybody talk to me about sex. I was one of the lucky ones. My mother told me about menstrual cycle and all of that when I was 7 years old, because of it runs in the family that the girls might get it early. I'm thankful she did it when I was 7 years old, but it wasn't until much later that I did. But I was told when I was 7 years old, and not in childish terms. I was given the entire information in very simple but real terms. And but even then, nobody spoke to me about sex, about sexual relationships, having a sexual relationship, what it's like to have sex. None of that was there. Today, children who are in primary school know what sex is, what it means, what it entails, all of that. Physical part of it, anyway. Whether the emotional and psychological part, that is another question. But what you're supposed to do, what happens, is something that they're. And children are experimenting a lot, not just children, adolescents and young adults are experimenting a lot. And there is a lot of research saying that not knowing what happens in real life, but getting information from media, visual media, and porn industry is damaging a lot of relationships, giving a lot of misinformation to young children. And that is causing a lot of harm in emotionally and psychologically, and in some cases physically. Outside India, not just outside India, in Western societies, in Europe, in America, I'm not saying it's ideal, I'm not saying that, but they're more open sexually. During the corona pandemic and the lockdown, there were news from European nations where governments were asking, there was this news article where one of the European nations asked people to find a sex buddy during the lockdown, because otherwise it might become problematic. And this obviously wasn't meant for adults, of course, but it was there. The very fact that we don't talk to our children about anything about sex leads to sexual experimentation. Knowing about more types of sexual orientation, diverse sexual orientations, might pique the interest of children, definitely. But that's not the only reason people are experimenting. The very lack, you started with it. Lots of things are taboo. Sex is taboo in our society. When I started out, I was talking to somebody on a railway, on a train in India, and it was a long journey. And I was talking to somebody about my research work, and these were all men. Okay, and I was talking to them. One of them was a teacher, and I was talking to them about. I was so excited. This was the first year I started out. I was a first year master's student, and I talked about intersex people, and all of them just showed so much interest. And then it was quite some time later that I realized they were all interested because they thought I'm talking about sex, and a girl talking about sex was something that they all found very, very happy about. I don't know what they thought I'm talking about. But once it turned out I'm talking about research and everything, they just kind of lost, a few of them lost interest. It wasn't much later. It wasn't until much later that I understood what had happened there. So
right.
we need to talk to children about it. We definitely need to. Whether it leads to experimentations, we need to open our eyes and understand that because we don't talk about it, we are not realizing what children are up to. I remember hearing stories in my school, in my college, and I hear stories now that I am not able to understand. Like, this is happening in schools now, in primary schools, and that's no laughing.
Right.
It isn't. So that question, I know I went on along for this, but we need to talk about this. We need to bring sex education among children, formally, informally. We need to talk to them. We need to educate them.
Right. So basically, from all the conversations that you've had, like I told you, with the community or with people who are allies or people who are advocates, people who are working for them, with them, the one common thing that we have found is everybody boils down to this point, that the only change that can happen is the way parents talk to their children.
Yes.
Opening up conversations, as in we cannot stress upon this more, like opening conversations between parents and children, and not making things like sex, etc., taboo, can help children in so many ways. One is when they really want to, for instance, suppose child wants to come out about their sexual orientation, it makes it much easier. It makes it even better. It's a better experience. Second thing is even mental health. These things that children cannot talk about because they're afraid of what? If I tell my mother I'm depressed or my father I'm depressed, they're going to shout at me, or they're going to say, "Hey, no, you're just going through a phase."
Children these days, they have all these fancy terms: depression, oppression.
Yeah.
In our times, they used to do that, we didn't have. So it definitely needs to change. Definitely. That's what I said. A safe space where children, not the age, have a safe space, a safe environment where children can communicate with you, and they will openly communicate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, it actually reduces the risk the child is at, because if it is known that a child is very open to the parents, it automatically gives a level of safety to the child, because anybody else knows that if anything happens, the child is going to report back to the parents.
Right.
And this is something I had personal experience with. My mother used to. Again from personal. I used to tell my mother everything. And when I was, what do I say? When I was older, my mother told me that some of those things, my mother used to, after I left the room, my mother used to have a calming down session, because the things that she heard, she said her top would blow off once I leave, or steam come out of her ears. But she never made me feel that when I was a kid. Right. So I used to tell her everything. And that message went around the community, so that we were safe. No matter what we did, we used to tell home. And that's one thing that children nowadays, especially children growing up with diverse identities, face. They face abuse, they face harassment, they face discrimination outside, and people feel it's okay to do it because nobody is going to stand up for the child.
Right. Absolutely.
The very knowledge that somebody will be there, somebody is there to question, to put the person to task, will stop a person with a not good intention. Absolutely. That is there.
Absolutely. Now, coming to corporates, like there's one question here which says, is there any improvement in society accepting people from diverse identities into the workforce? So there's one subject that's been going about a lot, within the corporate circle, which is gender equality has been around, but now they talk about allyship, they talk about inclusivity a lot more than before. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, how can these policies or these policies, how can they be improved upon, in your opinion? Do you think that they are where they should be, or do you think that there's scope for improvement, or do you think that these policies are coming in because of some external pressure and people don't really know what they're doing? Do you think that
that last point people really don't know what they're doing? Intention might be there, but actions speak louder than words.
Right.
Okay. So there are certain organizations, very young people are coming up with organizations now focusing on placing people, especially transgender people, into corporate jobs. And I was invited as a trainer for one of those month-long training sessions. Okay. And people, everybody got placed. All 25 people in the training place got placed in huge corporations like Walmart and all different corporate entities.
Ankita, how did you hear about this talk? Did you see it on the Ankita and Jaya? How did you come to know about this talk that we're doing today?
So we got to know through a group which was all about workshops.
Right. Oh, nice.
Posted it there. So that's how we got to know about it.
Lovely.
Quite interesting and a lot of very good inputs. I think this will help talk to our friends, and probably it's going to be a better world tomorrow. We'll hope for it.
That's the hope, right? That's why we're doing this, to probably educate people a little bit more and make them.
We had a conversation during the last socializing meet, like before the second wave. So we were talking about how do we understand what our child is tomorrow, and there's a lot of things on Netflix and the social media, not to blame anyone in particular. I mean, how do we safeguard our children, and what is the right kind of information? Sorry, that's my talk. Right kind of information that we need to provide our children at what age. So I think this is kind of giving us a lot of information and input.
I'm glad. I'm really glad. That is the idea.
Can I just ask you one thing?
Sure.
She had talked something about a penisectomy or something like that. What did she say? I missed that little bit. Since she's not online, could we just...
No, I'm here.
She's here.
I'm right.
Oh, she's back. Okay, fine. Then let's continue. Okay.
No, you can just go back to that little bit, Neeraja, so she can, she doesn't miss that out.
Yeah. It started raining, my net went off again. So now the Wi-Fi is back. So hopefully it doesn't get cut.
Right.
Yeah. So I was saying, could you please give me a jolt to my memory where we were?
We were talking about one of these recruitment things that you've gone for, where they were recruiting.
Yes. Yeah. So one thing that they were talking about was, it's all D&I, diversity and inclusion, right? So one major thing, they give her a good package, salary package and everything. And then she needed a surgery urgently. She needed to have a surgery for medical reasons. And she was kept waiting for weeks.
Okay.
Diversity and inclusion is not about giving somebody an entry into a corporate world, giving them economic means, or respecting their ability and their talent, their natural or their professional calling. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. What we need to remember, it's like a reservation policy for people with diverse identities. That's what it is about. But then that is necessary so that they can get a gateway into the world that is blocked off to them for being who they are or who they are. Okay. So it's like when another friend of mine went to a hospital during just after the lockdown for a medical checkup. The security guard turned her away at the gate because she looks more masculine and he thought she is a transgender person. This happens. So there is a gateway like that into corporate world, into professional world as well. And DNI is the key that was given so that at least some people can get into corporate world.
Right.
But that's not what all it should be. It should also be a way to sensitize other employees in the company, in the corporate, to use that corporate world as the platform where these people are sensitized towards the needs of the LGBTQ+ community. And then the corporate infrastructure or the power dynamics within this corporate become sensitized, that just giving a person place in the corporate is not enough, but you remain sensitized to their needs.
Right.
They need to have surgery, you don't keep them waiting for weeks. You don't dock their pay. They're not going for an elective surgery. This is something they're required. Even gender affirming surgery, it's considered elective by insurance companies right now. But those are not elective. They are not choosing to have the surgery. They need that surgery to get rid of the gender incongruence, earlier known as gender dysphoria, that they are experiencing. That is psychological trauma that they need relief from.
Right.
So these are not elective surgeries. So that this insensitivity is there. And DNI should be a way of not just giving people jobs, but of using the platform of workspace or workplace as a place for sensitizing at least part of the community, of the society. They take knowledge to their families, to their social circles, let it spread from there. That's the way it should be seen. And another major thing, DNI is for LGBTQI+ community, sure. And gender equality policies are for men and women. Come on, people who are, there is something known as intersectionality and positionality. So the intersectional framework or intersectional lens. The understanding is that each of us have different identities within my caste, my class, my race, my education, the social strata, my gender, if I have a disability, all of it. As a woman who is from a higher economic class, who is able-bodied, who has the best education and everything, still might face glass ceiling, okay? Still might face concepts like glass ceiling and glass cliff and all of them. But compared to a woman who is from a very poor background, economic background, from a lower caste, who has a disability, or who might have a diverse sexual orientation, the obstacles faced by that woman and the first woman cannot be compared, and they're both women.
Correct.
So when you're talking about gender equality, and you talk only about men and women, what about the others? What about other people with other diverse identities? Equality is applicable there too. Transgender people also come into gender policies.
Right.
Gay and lesbian people also come there, and they also face extra burden of obstacles because of their identity.
Right.
But there is this thing, okay, gender policy for men and women and DNI for everybody. That's the language used. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're absolutely right in that way. But at least it's a start, like at least it's a beginning.
It is definitely a start. It is definitely a start. But it has the potential to do so much more.
Absolutely. So tell us, Neeraja, how do you think a platform like Hoopsters can, besides doing these talks, etc., why do you think a platform like Hoopsters is important today to spread awareness about these things, and how can we do it better?
The first thing I would say is that so far I have not had, I was discussing with you earlier also, I have to be extra careful here because the people who are listening to us or will listen to us, this might be the first experience hearing about any of this. So if I am wrong about something here, I need to be extra careful not to be, because in most other places there will be people from the community, other activists, other researchers who can correct me or who can tell me what's what. So this is a unique opportunity. I have been doing this for 8 years now, and I have gone for training sessions of teachers. I have trained community members. I have trained doctors, nurses, hospital staff. I have done all of that. But I have never been given an audience or a chance to talk to people who are not part of the community in some way.
Right.
Okay. One teacher was connected to the community, so she called us for a training session for teachers. Hospitals and medical professionals, healthcare professionals need to know more about everybody in the society, because they are the ones giving us health and medical treatment. So this Hoopsters platform is the first place, and I know that I'm talking to parents. I'm talking to people who can give information to others who do not have any information, who do not have access to the community. So Hoopsters is now, if somebody wants to know more about it, they can tell, oh, I saw this in this video, maybe you can talk to them. They can email you. You might be able to build a network where you can you can send people, okay, you need to know more about, you have someone who's intersex person, okay, you can talk to this person, or you can talk to this organization. This is community building happening right here, and it is so important. It's
Right.
very important. This is a great place, and also a safe space where you can ask questions, where you learn. You don't have to be worried about offending somebody. This is something that I say everywhere. I talk to students, I say this is a safe space. You can, usually the students I talk to would be interns who are already working in organizations working for LGBTQI rights.
Mm-hmm.
So they already they have a foot in the world. But here, this is where they are putting their foot in the world. So
Right. I think we've gone way beyond the subject is like that. We are almost close to 2 hours into our talk, which shows how much there needs to be spoken about. So I think we have reached the end of our talk right now. Neeraja, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Ankita. Thank you, Jaya, for your questions, for interacting with us. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And Neeraja, I hope we can do a lot more talks like this. We break it down into smaller subjects and go deep into it. Right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nupur. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good evening.